Dr. Russell, I asked you questions about your past testimony regarding methodology. And when I asked you those questions and showed you some of your transcripts, would you agree with me that you have testified that there is no recognized methodology on diagnosing dog bite wounds?
No, I believe I said that there was no standard methodology or no standard guidelines as to how to diagnose dog bite wounds.
There is no accepted practice directing you on what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to identify a wound as a dog bite, is there?
There are no accepted standards.
When Attorney Alessi had you look at a couple of case files from the Journal of Legal Medicine, let me ask you about that. You're not suggesting that those articles substitute for the absence of standards in identifying dog bites from photographs, are you?
Before standards are created, there are usually articles that have recommendations upon which the standards are subsequently based.
That wasn't my question, so we're going to listen to the question, please.
Okay.
Those articles, whatever their value you think they are, they do not create a standard to apply for diagnosing or looking at a photograph and coming to a conclusion whether the abrasions are dog bites, do they?
Correct.
And so when he had you read pieces of these articles, had Attorney Alessi gone over these articles with you before?
Yes, we discussed them several months ago.
Did he point out parts of them he would like you to read?
I pointed out parts that I thought were significant.
In this article that was marked for identification, parts of it are highlighted. Who highlighted those parts?
Mr. Alessi highlighted those based on my recommendations.
So Attorney Alessi highlighted the parts he wanted you to read to the jury?
Yes, and I believe they were the same parts that I read last time.
Could we have Exhibit 1, please? Now, regarding the Munich article, that was a case study on the unfortunate death of a young girl, yes?
Yes.
Who was attacked by or bitten by up to 3 different dogs.
Yes.
And it was a neck wound from which she bled.
Yes.
Very, very unlike what you're looking at here.
Yes, but that's very typical of an article, scientific article. They will present a case study and then present the research behind what they have seen in other articles and make recommendations.
I'm not asking you to defend that it's different. I'm asking you if it is different.
Oh, it is different.
Very different, isn't it?
Yes, that neck wound, yes.
Extraordinarily different.
Yes.
And so when you read this, let me ask you a couple questions. In this article, it talks about the characteristics of dog bites, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it talks about the maxillary teeth distal to the mandibular teeth allow the so-called scissor bite.
Yes.
So when the dog clamps down, the teeth kind of go to the side to tear the skin.
I didn't interpret it that way, no.
Okay. A scissor bite is when a dog bites down, yes?
Yes, I believe that what they were describing was the dog bites down.
And when it bites down, it anchors. That means teeth on the bottom penetrate, puncture, yes?
They can, but they don't always puncture.
And then the top is a puncture. If you're going to scissor, it requires a puncture, doesn't it?
It's a mechanism. It's a movement. What they're describing is a move. The way I read it, the way they described it is a movement like a scissor, where it's open and it's closed. It doesn't mean anything about how deep they penetrate.
There are no scissor bites on that wound, are there?
I don't know. I see 1 or 2 things that show up what I think might be upper and lower, so it could be.
Would you define any of those abrasions as scissor bites, Dr. Russell?
We talked earlier about how these marks here may be lower. I'm not going to define it. No, I can't say for sure that there's a scissor bite, but I see things that appear to be characteristics of upper and lower teeth.
I'm asking you about scissor bites. Please listen to my question. There is nothing on that wound that is consistent with scissor bites, is there?
I don't know.
Well, you're the expert. So when you look at that, can you point whether there's any wounds that are consistent with scissor bites?
According to their definition, and that's not an accepted definition, but according to what they were describing, and I believe what they meant was an open and closing of the jaw as the scissor activity, I believe that there's possibly 2 areas where I see that.
You're now saying this article that you relied on redirect examination is not an accepted authority?
I'm not saying it's not an accepted authority. It is a peer review article.
The injuries caused involve a combination of biting, crushing, and tearing. Do you see any crushing or tearing in those abrasions?
There's no crushing or tearing here, but does not mean that there has to be crushing or tearing.
I'm reading your article. I'm just reading verbatim, and I'm asking you about it.
Yes, and I'm trying to explain so that nobody gets nobody misunderstands this.
Crushing and tearing that result in characteristic pattern of punctures. A puncture is when a tooth penetrates the skin and there's some depth to it, correct?
Yes.
Show me one puncture, anyone, on that wound.
Okay. There are no punctures on this arm that I see. However, again, the wounds don't have to have every single characteristic. It is it depends on the force of the bite, how the wounds are going to appear.
The injuries caused involve a combination of biting, crushing, and tearing that results in a characteristic pattern of punctures, lacerations, and avulsions. There is no punctures whatsoever in that wound. Would you agree with me?
I agree.
There are no lacerations in that wound. Would you agree with me?
I agree.
There are no avulsions in that wound. Would you agree with me?
I agree. However,
I'm just asking you the question, Dr. Russell.
So you can maybe ask her now.
Specifically, this study says the injuries cause a combination biting, crushing, and tearing that result in characteristic pattern of punctures, lacerations, and avulsions. They name 3 things that are characteristic traits of a dog bite, and you would agree not one of those 3 traits is present on the arm of Mr. O'Keefe. Would you agree with me?
I agree. However, in that case, those were dog bites that killed the victim. In this case, we do not believe that these dog bites killed the victim.
When they were discussing this article on the victim who was killed, do you realize when they were giving background, this background has nothing to do with the case study? This is general background I just read. Do you realize that?
They were investigating fatal dog bites.
Do you realize that is not qualified in this article? You realize that?
I realize that they were commenting on fatal dog bites. This is not a case of a fatal dog bite.
This article, I'm going to show it to you. May I approach?
Yes.
In the highlighted paragraphs that Attorney Alessi had you read, that is describing the background of dog bites, not this fatal attack. Would you agree with me?
The title of the... No, I don't agree.
Okay. I move to introduce this as an exhibit, please.
Mr. Alessi? Okay.
Is it 210?
In the other article that you read from, that was highlighted as well. Who highlighted the portions you were to read?
Mr. Alessi.
It describes that teeth from a canine create a stab wound-like skin laceration. They can do that, right?
They can do
Do you
that.
see any stab-like wound lacerations to Mr. O'Keefe's arm?
No.
It talks about punctures. And again, we've discussed this. There is 0 punctures on Mr. O'Keefe's arm, correct?
Correct.
You said that when somebody is in a collision, that they can suffer injuries such as bruising or breaks.
Yes.
We've also discussed when a person is impacted by a vehicle, it can result in a variety of different injuries or no injury at all.
Correct.
There's a number of dynamic factors involved that are very difficult to assess and predict, correct?
Correct.
And in this case, you did not do any accident reconstruction to try to identify the details of the mechanism of injury to John O'Keefe, did you?
I did not do accident reconstruction.
And so, having not done accident reconstruction, would you agree it's fair to say that you are not in an informed position to give an opinion as to how the injuries could or would have happened in this case?
I disagree.
Specifically, you were asked questions about the impact or collision in this case. How fast was the defendant's Lexus traveling when there may have been an impact in this case?
I understand possibly 24 miles an hour.
Who picked that number?
I have no idea.
Well, you heard it from somewhere and you've just given an opinion on it. Where is that number committed to or derived from?
I don't know.
Well, if you're going to give an opinion based on what you're portraying as facts to this jury, you should have some certainty about the source of your material, shouldn't you?
You know, I'm an ER doctor, so in the ER, I've treated thousands of motor vehicle accident cases. And most of the time, I do not know what speed the vehicles were going at. I've never done accident reconstruction. I don't know any ER doctor that does accident construction or is trained in accident construction. It's not part of the job.
I totally agree, but you're having opinions you're giving on behalf of Mr. Alessi, and that's why I'm pressing you on these issues.
Sustained.
Do you know, you don't know the movement of John O'Keefe before any potential strike or collision, do you?
I don't know the movement of most of the patients I've seen in my life before or immediately after the impact.
Of course, you wouldn't know the body angle because you weren't there.
Right.
So when you're asked to give an opinion whether this was a clip or a direct strike, you're really not in a position, having not been an accident reconstructionist and not having been there, to give that type of information, are you?
I wasn't asked to give an opinion about whether this was a clip or a direct strike. I was asked to give an opinion about these wounds caused by a motor vehicle collision.
So you would agree with me, you are not in a position, based on your opportunity to view evidence and your experience, to give an opinion about what injuries would have occurred in this event?
No, I disagree.
And so you think you can give an opinion about the extent of injuries, even though you are agreeing, not only you're not an accident reconstruction expert, you have no idea about the details of the collision in this case, Dr. Russell.
Mr.
Is
Brennan,
that true?
I have no details about the collision?
About what happened during the collision. You have no details about the body movement, the placement, the speed. You don't have any details that you know of other than what was told to you, correct?
Sustained.
There are dozens, hundreds, thousands of motor vehicle accidents in which there are no lower body brakes. Fair to say?
Probably, yes.
You mentioned bruising. What do you do to treat for a bruise? If someone's has some type of pressing and the bruise before it really forms, what's the best way to treat it?
Well, it depends on the bruise, it depends on the location, it depends on whether or not there's continued bleeding in the soft tissues. It depends on whether there's compression of the blood vessels and or the nerves underneath. And then, and of course, you want to examine adjacent structures for fractures and other injuries. And then after all that, if you've ruled out major, other injuries, you treat the patient for pain.
You ever prescribe ice?
Oh, yes.
So if a person was lying prone in the cold winter on the front yard on the dirt and was being covered by snow, sub 32 degrees, and the body temperature were to drop from 96.8 to about 80 degrees, would that have a similar effect to ice on the area that may bruise?
Not exactly. You want me to explain?
I do.
Okay, yes. So as the snowflakes fall, yes, there will be a gradual lowering of the body temperature and gradual effect on the body. Now, as opposed to in the ER or in a medical setting, if I or another practitioner, and by the way, nurses and nurse practitioners and PAs also treat dog bite wounds. But if another practitioner, a practitioner gives the person an ice pack, they get immediate coldness and immediate significant change in temperature to that area.
Assume the weather is so cold that the cell phone battery on someone's iPhone begins to plummet regularly in degrees.
I have no idea.
Objection, Your Honor.
So the objection sustained.
Thank you.
When you came to your conclusion, considering what you see in this picture, and Attorney Alessi was asking you about fragments from a broken taillight, did you know or consider that Mr. O'Keefe, sometime around when he incurred these wounds, had a piece of glass stuck in his nose?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Finally, Dr. Russell, you said during your differential diagnosis you consider information, you either weigh it, accept it, or you distinguish it and you disregard it, correct?
Yes, generally.
During your differential diagnosis, you've referred to a number of different people studies, things that you haven't done yourself, but you've looked at other people's efforts. One of the things you looked at was the deputy medical examiner from the Forensic Pathology Investigations Division of the Armed Forces, a person by the name of John C. Walsh, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow that.
Would you like me to ask that again, Dr. Russell?
No, you don't have to ask it. I read that report, yes.
And John C. Walsh is a doctor, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
And do you have any understanding that he works with the Forensic Pathology Investigations Division of the Armed Forces?
Yes, and therefore his practice may be limited in scope.
Well, you are trying to qualify what he doesn't do. Do you know if his practice is limited in scope?
Typically, the medical examiners that work for the armed forces often have a specific practice that is limited in scope.
Do you know anything about Mr. Walsh and his practice?
No.
Why do you find the need to try to undermine the extent of his authority before you know anything? Why is that important?
Objection.
Sustained.
You don't know what his scope and practice is, do you?
No, but I always look at where the person works that writes a report in terms of physicians and what their possible experiences are. Do they work in a medical examiner's office in Alaska or Hawaii or a big city or a little town? I look at those things.
When you considered his opinions after his review of these materials, did you consider when he offered in his report that multiple abrasions ranging in size from 2 to 3 millimeters up to 7 centimeters were documented on the decedent's right arm?
Yes.
These injuries do not photographically appear to be, nor are described as puncture bite wounds, and thus are highly unlikely to be the result of an animal bite attack. The abrasions are non-specific. Abrasions occur as the body moves over a blunt or rough surface such as a skinned knee. Did you read his report and consider it?
I did. However, I don't know if he's ever had any experience with dog bites examinations. So I had to consider that and weigh it.
Dr. Russell, there were questions with regard to highlighting of articles. Did I determine which parts were to be highlighted, or did I merely perform the function of highlighting the parts you wanted me to highlight because you didn't have a highlighting function with you traveling from California?
That is correct. It's the second one.
With regard to these articles, you mentioned a methodology in connection with them, and a pattern recognition methodology. Was it the purpose of citing this article to say that they're just like this situation, or was the purpose to say that there is a methodology in the literature to determine how to determine whether a wound is from a dog?
Objection.
Sustained as to the form.
Dr. Russell, what is the purpose? Let's just start with the Demunic article that was talked about, because these articles were discussed. What was the purpose of you citing to those articles?
The purpose was to identify that pattern recognition is an important component in identifying wounds, and particularly in dog bite wounds. It did not mean that the victim had to have every single characteristic that was listed. And it just was focusing on things to look for, and the patterns. It was not just that there's one individual wound that's going to be diagnostic, but that there are patterns for the physician to look for.
In terms of, Attorney Brennan asked, and so now with regard to the Pollock article, in terms of the Pollock article, is there any discussion in this article about whether the spectrum of injuries to which you can apply the mechanism and the methodology, is there anything in there about whether the pattern of injuries can be diverse or whether they're all the same? Does Pollock speak to that?
He does.
And what does Pollock say about whether or not the spectrum of possible injury forms when you apply this methodology can be diverse? What does he say?
Well, he mentions about the actual surface of the body that is impacted, if there's any curvature to that surface, if there's any structures underneath that would affect the bite. So yeah, those are, and if there was material or textiles or fabric that were in between the bite and the skin, and there were other factors too.
Okay, thank you. Now, lastly, what I'd like to cover is Attorney Brennan discussed the Dr. Walsh. May I approach, Your Honor?
Okay. Did you show Mr. Brennan?
He's the one who gave me it.
Okay. I didn't know what you had.
Yes, thank you. So may I hand to the witness?
Yes.
May I stand here, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just step back a little
Yes.
bit.
Yep. Start back as everything. Dr. Russell, what I would like to do is to give the jury a fair
Objection.
I'll withdraw it.
Objection to commentary, and I'd like to be heard.
Why don't you bring the reports over?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, I am re-handing you this letter from Dr. Walsh, and what I am going to do, and you just tell me if I do it correctly, I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs, okay? And you just tell me if I'm reading it correctly. In totality, the injuries documented in the autopsy report and photographs are non-specific and may be the result of a variety of different mechanisms. No additional information was provided regarding the possible circumstances or events surrounding the death. The absence of additional information prohibits the attribution of injuries and contribution of findings to a specific underlying cause of death. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you, Dr. Russell.
All right, Dr. Russell, you are all set.
Thank you.